We're going to call the meeting to order at 2:01 p.m. Let's have roll.
Davis.
Here.
Jimenez.
Here.
Kamei. Foley.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, we're going to start by reviewing the agenda for October 24th, and there is an ad sheet. So we're starting on closed session at 9:30, open session, regular session at 1:30, and the evening session to be canceled. We have ceremonials on page 5, consent page 6, 7, and 8. And strategic support, retirement services interim audit report, purchase orders, some electric providers, resolution supporting LGBTQ community, that's 3.5. Page 10, section 4.1, retail, the retail theft grant. 6.1, recommended deferral. 6.2, climate smart semi-annual report. Page 12, section 8.1, approval of multifamily housing revenue that will be heard after land use consent. 8.2, ordinance amending Title V.
Excuse me, Chair, Lee Wilcox, Assistant City Manager. As part of the recommendation, can we are requesting a sunshine waiver for 8.2.
Okay.
Related to declaration, shelter crisis, and proclamation that was supposed to post on Friday, and I believe it posted last night.
Okay, so the maker of the motion will include the sunshine waiver. 8.3 to be heard before 8.2,
La
actions
persona que
related
está haciendo la moción,
emergency interim housing.
8.3, se va a escuchar
Got our
antes del
translator on the wrong
8.2
channel.
y
Okay.
tiene que ver con la vivienda interina para
Okay, we need to.
Okay, all right, and then land use, we have land use, one item on land use consent, which will be heard immediately after consent. So if I read this correctly, 10.1 goes after consent, followed by 8.1, followed by 8.3, followed by 8.2. And then we have, we have actually 2 items on land use consent. Let's go to public comment.
No hands raised at this time.
All right, so
Move
do we
a-
have a motion?
Move approval of the October 24th agenda with the ad sheet and the sunshine waiver.
Second.
All right, any other comments? If not, let's go to a vote. All right, that motion carries 4-0 with Kamei absent. And now we will review the agenda for October 31st. Scheduled for, again, 9:30 closed session and 1:30 regular session. Ceremonials on page 5, consent starting on page 5, continuing to page 6. Section 3 on page 7 has first council focus areas status report and a master agreement for Five Wounds Trail. And, nothing else. That's it.
I'm assuming it's because it's
Costumes optional. Is that Halloween? Keeping the meeting short for Halloween?
Trying to make sure Sergio can trick or treat.
All right, let's see if we have any public comments on this agenda.
No hands raised at this time.
All right, back to
Move approval
committee.
of the 1031 agenda.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Draft agenda is approved, 4-0. And now we're on the consent calendar, and we have 5 items for consent. Are there any hands up in public comment?
No hands raised.
Move
Okay.
approval.
Second.
All right, let's vote on consent.
What is happening? Keep going.
All right, that motion carries 4-0, and we are up to section C. We have one policy item, memo signed by myself, Vice Mayor, and the Mayor, and Lomeo's here to give a brief overview.
Chair Cohen and members of the Rules Committee. My name is Michael Lomeo. I am Mayor Matt Mahan, Senior Land Use and Economic Development Policy Advisor. Thank you to Vice Mayor Kamei and Councilmember Cohen for their collaboration on this memorandum. I would like to share with you some of the work our offices have been conducting in coordination with key city staff members and in coordination with stakeholders in the private sector. With the goals of attracting more jobs to San Jose, streamlining city workflows so that our hardworking city staff can become even more productive than they already are, and catching this economic and technological wave of artificial intelligence, here in San Jose, we submit to you a memorandum that aims to incentivize artificial intelligence innovation. We humbly request your support for this memo, which can be broken into 3 primary pillars. The first is to support the development of an AI ecosystem in San Jose by offering incentives that make sense and by attracting 1 or more AI incubators to San Jose. Second is to support the city's adoption of AI tools with the hope of reducing overall workload and enhancing city services by becoming more productive by using AI to our staff's advantage. 3, lastly, we want to secure grants from our government and philanthropic partners that offer them and integrate ethics, best practices, and benchmarking into our city's own work. The memo has been crafted in a way that leaves flexibility for staff to continue their work, much of which is already underway, and to initiate new work when funding and resources are available. Again, we humbly request your support for this memo. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any public comment?
Jordan?
Hi, I'd like to speak in opposition to the memo's recommendations. Recommendation 4 is inappropriate. We should not spend staff time to raise money for private businesses, especially when we have budget deficits and staff shortages. This could maybe make sense in specific circumstances if we are engaging with a San Jose business in a public-private partnership that has already been properly bid for. Otherwise, this should not be a blanket policy. Recommendation 1 should be rejected because we shouldn't create programs based on fads. Today's AI craze is more hype than substance. We cannot build a stable tax base on top of an unstable industry. There is significant risk that we'll spend significant money and still end up without a robust economy, or that we'll be subsidizing companies that abuse personal data. We should build a diverse tax base around the diversity of proven industries and that we know with certainty will benefit the local populace. Recommendation 2 isn't terrible if it requires no city funding and little staff time. But if it requires a lot of staff time or funding, I oppose it on the same grounds that I oppose recommendations 1 and 4. For recommendations 3 and 5, I feel like this is a solution in search of a problem. There are definitely problems with how the city run software, and there's definitely problems that can be solved with software, but we should identify those problems specifically and solve them in the best way possible. And the best way possible will, more often than not involve AI at all. Most of our problems can be solved with proven technology, or maybe not even technology at all. A lot of problems the city has are more organizational problems or prioritization problems. So again, I oppose all of the recommendations. Please don't spend city money and time on hype. Thank you.
Blair?
Hi, Blair Beekman. I have a lot to say on this item. I'll be writing yourselves letters on this subject. Thank you very much for the previous public comment. We spoke very eloquently that you guys are going to have to really better address this issue. There is an adult in the room. Thank you for the previous public comment. Please be considering this. I think it's a really, really bad idea. We have to have a focus more on human rights ideas, and it has to be definitely balanced in how you talk about these issues. It's a reminder of how important we have to talk about human rights at this time in AI practices, in our technology practices. Boy, a lot of stuff to talk about. Good luck. Please don't. I don't want to work on this issue, but it needs balance, and you know that. Please learn how to talk about balance of human rights with these sort of practices, and let's not move into this direction. Let's move towards human rights directions. Thank you.
Ellen?
Hello?
Go ahead, Ellen.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm aware that the city is already using artificial intelligence and programs to help them make flyers, make announcements, abatement notices. And I have pointed it out to them that they need to have someone proofreading these. Some of the legal misrepresentation is being printed out by the artificial intelligence programs and software, and it definitely needs to be corrected. For instance, when it says Coyote Creek, you are trespassing. Not really sure how that's even possible, but when using these programs, things like that will happen, and it can lead to a lot of problems if there is not a human who proofreads these things. Since they're already being used, I know they're being used. I could see, they start out with, I hope this letter finds you well. It's a very common start for artificial intelligence paperwork. I think that it's essential that it gets proofreaded by lawyers and by humans. And if anything, if we can fund some proofreading, because it's already being used. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
All right, thank you. We'll start with Councilmember Jimenez.
I'd actually really
Oh, I'm
like
sorry,
to hear
Lee
from
wanted, I wanted to
Wilcox
ask
first.
Lee to describe the early consideration form first.
Thank you, Councilmember. Staff does have an early consideration form on this, and I do want to state that recommendations 3, 4, and 5 are a green light. Those are things that between the Office of Economic Development and our IT department that we're doing. I want to note that recommendation 2 is also a green light under the kind of rubric of core economic development principles and work around business retention, expansion, and attraction. So as we pivot to focus on that industry, there definitely, I'm sure, will be conversations with partners about potential incubator or accelerator spaces. I do want to note that many cities support those type of efforts through paying rent and taking lease space on their own. If that's the case here, we would bring that forward for council's consideration as part of the budget process, because we are currently not resourced to do that. And then last, recommendation 1, which is develop a pilot program, is a yellow light. Again, under core economic development activities, the city will be speaking to these type of companies and working on relocating them to San Jose or helping existing ones in San Jose expand, which is core to our work. But the development of a larger pilot program to this specificity would require a great deal of analysis. So we can do some high-level work and come back through the budget process on what that would take and look like as part of a high-level analysis, if the council wishes.
All right, thank you. Now, Councilmember Jimenez.
Thank you. Just a few thoughts. I would first say that as this item comes forward to the full council, there's a lot of tech speak in here, and I think it's going to be important to make sure that that everyone on the council understands what we're talking about. AI is obviously something that is discussed very commonly in media and the news and things of that nature, but I think there's a lot that I personally don't understand. So I would just ask, as this comes forward, that it's put into language that we can all sort of grasp and understand. The other thing that I was thinking about is whenever I hear about AI in the news cycle, such testimony at congressional hearings and things of that nature, it's often folks sort of touching on the things we need to be careful about, aware of as this develops further in our society. And so what I'd be curious about is when this comes forward, if we can also get some updates related to what the efforts are at the federal level in order to sort of reel in some of these approaches as it relates to AI. And so with that in mind, I was looking at recommendation 5, I think, direct city managers to explore and integrate ethics, best practices, benchmarking. That sort of led me down this road, but that seems to me to be an internal sort of component as it relates to some of the companies that are going to be operating. I'm thinking more globally, and so what comes to mind as well is the IGR's team is thoughts or recommendations as it relates to some federal sort of movement to make sure we're very thoughtful as a society and we as a city are lifting up our concerns as it relates to the ethical sort of use of AI moving forward. So just wanted to put that out there. And I'm going to be supportive of it.
All right. I don't see any other hands, so I'm just going to weigh in since I'm co-author on the memo and talk about it a little bit. You know, I think people are hearing that sensationalized media version of what AI means, and that often isn't necessarily what we're talking about. We already use AI in our phones every day. We say, hey Siri, and that's AI telling us, getting us an answer. More importantly, we use maps every day, and AI is using predictive technology to figure out where traffic gets worse and better. You know almost immediately when there's a traffic in front of you, and that's because AI is doing that work. AI is helpful for transportation prediction, for example. We could have technology in the city that helps us time our streetlights better using AI technology. We could have all kinds of tools that help us internally. We could have it for processing applications for land use and other things to speed things along. There's a lot of AI tools, and I think item number 3, which is already, I think already in the work plan for the IT department anyway, to begin looking at what kind of tools could help us going forward in terms of bringing some of these things in. So we have to always be aware, and I think number 5, you're right, Councilmember Jimenez, number 5 refers mainly to what we do as a city and what the ethical and best practices will be, the ethics implications and best practices will be as we integrate those things into our city. I'm not convinced it's the city's role to tell private companies as they develop tools for AI, you know, what they should or shouldn't be developing in our city boundaries. What I'm thinking is, you know, as new technologies develop over time, the internet, for one, which clearly led to a lot of ethical and societal issues. Social media is another one that had moved forward. Obviously, semiconductors and all the technology. There have always been these ethical questions as these new technologies come forward. Robotics, for example. But what we really want to make sure in this memo is, as this ecosystem grows and a whole bunch of companies are beginning to develop, why not invite them to do it inside San Jose rather than in San Mateo County or in San Francisco, where they're going to be inevitably developing these technologies anyway? This is about bringing companies into the city and not about what technologies we support or don't support as a city. That's what most of the memo is about. Obviously, I'll address the question about number 1 being, you know, something that we can't necessarily do right away. So I think that's the main idea here. Let's direct some of our efforts in our economic development department, whose job it is to recruit companies into the city, to recruiting this specific industry and maybe building a critical mass of companies in the city, so that we have the industry developing here. And we already know we have the highly technical workforce in the city of San Jose and the surrounding cities to do it. We're the city with the most patents of any city in the United States, because of the people who are trained in the city to work in companies like this. So I think that's the intent behind most of this. The other thing I would say is that let me ask Lee a question about this. So number 3, 4, and 5, they're green lit, and they're not something that would come back to council. Rules Committee could make this move. The process would begin moving forward if the Rules Committee were to pass 3, 4, and 5. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so yeah, so we would say let's take this direction. Number 2, I think the wording there just says explore the potential for an incubator. It doesn't say anything about doing it, and that's really what you said in the memo, is that you could come back and say what it would take. Of course, if we were to do that, then we would have to have council discussion on the implications and the costs, if there were any, or whether there could be some private partnership that funds whatever incubator is developed here. Number 1 is the one that is more in question because it does ask for staff time to develop a pilot program. So I think if somebody's willing to make a motion to adopt the memo 2 through 5 with number 1 just being to come forward with an MBA in the budget process next year about what it would take to develop a pilot program for AI economic development in the city. So that's what I would hope that a motion might sound like. Those are my comments. Councilmember Menez, I see your hands back up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it as you were talking, and I understand that I agree with you that we don't, you know, we're not going to be dictating what some of these corporations are going to be developing internally. I mean, half the time we don't even know what they're doing, right? But I think I would just put on the table this in my mind, like this existential rhetorical question is, and what's the responsibility of the city? Or does the city have any responsibility as it relates to the technology that emerges from some of these companies that we help facilitate the development of? And so I think that's a broader question that we need to think about and ponder. One thing that comes to mind, I remember watching that movie sometime back called, was Sylvester Stallone. I think they had the pre-crime unit. And so predictive policing and things of that nature, I think. Yeah, what was it called? Minority Report. Yeah. And Tom Cruise, sorry, one of those guys. Anyway, that's where my head goes as it relates to some of this stuff, right? And where we are going as a society. And oftentimes, I would say that I suspect, this is probably shared by other colleagues up here, is when we're using technology as an example in that way, the communities of color in our city and in our country, I'm sure, often feel that, my sentiment is that we often get caught in that sort of net in that particular instance, for example. As an example, there was facial recognition software that misidentified folks of color more often than Caucasian folks, for example. And so that's what comes to mind as I think about technology and its use as it relates to the everyday sort of use of cities. And so I just want to put out these sort of feelers and these thoughts as it relates to going down the road and talking about this and moving down the road and facilitating the development of some of this technology. I would hate, again, pure exaggeration, and I'm sort of saying this in a joking manner, but that, we often think about the movie Terminator and that, we may be heading down that direction, and I would hate that I'll probably be dead by then, but even if indeed we did go down that direction, I would hate to the birth of the company that created that to be from San Jose, for example, right? I mean, as silly as it sounds, but those are the type of things that I think we need to start thinking about.
So we're happy that Facebook is not in San Jose, is what you're saying.
Well, no, well, yeah. Anyway, different implications, unless they start, sending out robots to do a few things. But
I mean,
anyway, you get my point.
No, I get your point, and I think it's really important for us on any technologies that we would implement in the city to be having very aware as to whether the technologies are fair, are accurate, are appropriate for what we do. And we ought to be having those conversations for everything that we implement within the city. And we know it's not just facial recognition, but voice recognition doesn't work as well. And because they're these tools are only as good as what they're trained with, so they need to do better. And I certainly agree with that. I also think our IGR team should be looking at what kind of legislation's out there and what should we as a city support, because it will be important to the residents of our city. And I consider that something we should do regardless of this memo or not.
And I agree with your sentiment that it's happening anyway. Why not have it happen here and us derive the benefits of some of that development? And so I appreciate that. So I'll move approval of the memo. I forget exactly what the...
Basically with item 1 being brought back as part of the budget process with an MBA.
Okay, so I'll move approval of the memo with item 1 being brought back as in the budget process as an MBA.
Second.
All right, any other comments? All right, if not, we'll vote. All right, and that motion carries 4-0. That brings us to the final item, open forum.
Gail?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Gail. I just came back from a large encampment over at Monterey and Capitol. There's 35 people there, and they're getting abated. And of course, there's no place for them to go. I know this is not in any one of your district. There's no place. There's nobody has been over there to contact them. No city, no anybody else, no nonprofit. There's no place for them to go. So maybe where? Why are we continually abating folks? We just abated hundreds of folks around Waz Way, all the way down to Santa Clara. A lot of them got inside. That's great at the arena, which, by the way, is not running very well right now, but that's another story. We have to stop these abatements with no place for people to go. Let's go there, do an extensive cleanup, and we can keep it clean. They can keep it clean. But right now, it is county property. I am dealing with top-notch people from the county. I've gone to Senator Cortese on this because I think we cannot be continually abating folks with no place to go. I'm just letting you know. And another problem we have coming up, I think you all need to think about what's going to happen when they abate all the RVs at Columbus Park. Where are they going to go? Oh, nowhere. In your backyard, in your neighborhood. There's no place for them to go. Nobody's working on anything. And this is horrible. So we need to start thinking about these.
Ellen? Ellen, go ahead and unmute.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to comment, thank you, Gail, for calling in, I appreciate that, and we'll talk later. So what I wanted to say was, you know, I had been in one of the Guadalupe tiny homes, and there has been some serious issues going on there. Serious is serious. So they are putting people out on the street, including myself, with no course of action, no kind of anything offered, really, except for all your stuff put on the side of the road and figure it out, or they're throwing it in the dumpster, or it's getting stolen by all of the neighbors. And this needs to be addressed. What happens when someone does leave interim housing or gets kicked out for reasons that no due process? So about the tiny homes and about the parking, safe parking. You know, I'm here at Columbus Park now, and no one is offering safe parking, like no one. And the safe parking areas, I understand, are wide open. They're still coming with the barriers of you need registration, a working vehicle, and insurance. Well, if people had all of that, why would they need safe parking? They could just move their car, right, or their RV. I haven't heard anybody going in addressing the bio waste, doing any kind of pumping of RVs or offering these kind of services. And I also have not heard of anybody being able to tow any of these vehicles to the safe parking. Okay, this is something that can be done. It wouldn't be very hard to have someone rent a Ryder truck and contract them to.
Jordan?
Hi, I just wanted to propose that we look into using software of any kind of proven kind to definitely improve how the city operates. One really good example, at the start of the meeting, you guys were trying to figure out the order that the agenda items were going to come up in, because some, even though they're numbered later, come up earlier. And that's very confusing to residents who aren't familiar with these proceedings. You know, we should be using software that makes it easier for the public to engage in our democracy by showing to citizens the actual order that agenda items are going to come up in. You know, other ideas are, you know, there's a lot of data that's submitted to the city about issues relating to parking or blockages in bike lanes. It would be great if all that data was made available in more open data sets that people could look at on the city website and see, you know, heat maps of problems, or, you know, how many citations are issued. A related issue is there's been a lot of reporting in the past year or two about San Jose City Council voting to make it harder for people to make data requests to the city. And I think that's a great place where we can use software, not necessarily AI, probably not AI, but use software to make it easier for people to not only make their requests, but to have more of it available on demand, rather than it, you know, needing to be hidden behind a request that is then, you know, needs a human to meet the request. So use software, not necessarily AI, that's available today to solve real government problems. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned at 2:31 PM.